I just want to thank you once again for taking up your time. I'm so passionate about doing this. I always feel that I have the right to ask questions. Even when I was in school, I'm always the one, putting up the hand to answer questions, or the one putting up my hand to ask questions. And I even had my law lecturer really quite fed up with me. For today, I just want to talk about something that is really close to my heart as a social observer, and also your take on being a father, and also being the founding father of the Polytechnics in Singapore. Much more so on a personal level, you being a dad, and you also being a son. Right, me, I've been a daughter, and I've been a student before, and I've lived abroad, and I see how the difference in education and how other children are being brought up. So this really impacts on my thinking. Me being a teacher, and even if I were to walk into a classroom right now, I'm also very mindful what kind of values I bring into a class, and what kind of impact on my behavior, the words that I choose, how I conduct myself in front of all these hundreds of students that are in our hands, that pass through our hands, that they could spend more time with us than with their parents. Probably with their parents, they would just go to the market, eat their food, and then watch TV together. I don't think the kind of you have to really put in a lot of quality effort in order to have a real communication with your child. So on this note, I just want to share with you a little bit myself, just to kickstart our conversation. When I was in France, I lived there for quite a few years, 7 years, and I was studying in the university in the French university. I was studying French, and we had to do presentations. And of course, the first thing I do about understanding Singapore is the first thing I bring up is the education system. When people want to talk about, if you want to tell people about the country, the first thing I would say, it's either economic GDP growth, employment, investment. For me, naturally, as an educator in the past, even myself as a teacher, I would bring out the education system. And the education system in Singapore is something that we are very proud of. And for the last 10 years, under the OECD ranking of the PISA ranking, Singapore is always top 2. It's either top 2 or the worst is always top 3. Surpassed either by the Japanese or the Chinese. And I always pride myself, and I told the French and all my international classmates, it's like, this is a PISA ranking. To these people, it's like, okay, this is not very important. So then it's not very important.
We should think hard about this PISA ranking. I mean, all the Asian countries, China, and a lot of these are quite based on a lot of rote learning, practicing 10-year series, and
correct.
And, as you mentioned earlier, your email messages, tiger mums and things like that. Maybe we have to change a little bit, and we can have a lower ranking, and maybe we can add more value to the students. So that's my thought.
So I would like to start off also having that said, in the eyes of a lot of people, rankings are not that important. And secondly is me also being an entrepreneur. I've started business, I've headed business, I've managed businesses. I also see the McGregor, the management theory of McGregor, theory X and theory Y. Theory Y says you respect the people, you respect your employees, you think that they're initiative, they are creative, they can be responsible, you can give them jobs and they can do well, you believe in them. And theory X says you view your subordinates or your colleagues as people who are lazy, irresponsible, they try to skive, they try to do at the minimal, and they need to be beaten in order to, or be punished in order to produce. Theory X and theory Y. So, in terms of managing a school and managing a country, I thought this is so apt. being a parent, do we adopt theory Y or theory X? And as a teacher, do I adopt theory Y or theory X when I go into a class? So that actually gave me my fundamental value when I go into a class. Do I use value X or value theory X or theory Y as a teacher? When I go into a class, do I believe that they are creative, they can take responsibility, that they do not need to be beaten up and punished, but rather they be motivated and rewarded, and they have a sense of responsibility. So it's always there's this dichotomy, I think, at the crossroads, especially we're talking about millennials now. So with these two stories as a background, that I was in France, and when I presented Singapore about the Singapore rankings, and people not interested at all. Yes. Number two is that also my management background about McGregor's theory, I thought that was so right, and when I go into a class, what kind of values do I bring, and what kind of attitude do I view my students? Right. So with that little bit of story in the background, this topic is so close to my heart. That's why I thought it's so urgent for us to talk, because we are facing at the crossroads of millennials, and with the onset of the internet world. How do you view your education system given to you? What kind of values do you think and your teachers and your staff should bring to your school? And what kind of culture should we inculcate in the family? Because family is part of education. So with that, I'd like to give the floor to you, Eden. You must have thought about this for a long time. I've thought about this for many years.
Well, I also studied overseas. I went to UK under under scholarship. I didn't get the scholarship earlier, and I spent 3 months in the time they call it the Singapore University. And I spent 3 months in Singapore University doing engineering. And then I left Singapore and went to UK and did a similar engineering degree in Newcastle. It was really a big difference. In Singapore, during that 3 months, I was struggling from lecture to tutorial to labs, and then back to lectures, tutorial labs, and it's all trying. And of course, in those days, Singapore University engineering department was a bit strange. It has 2 campuses, and you've got to take bus to one campus and then go to another campus for another lesson and things like that. But the reality of it is that when I went over to UK, all the burdens of trying to capture notes, trying to catch up with tutorials, suddenly fall off, and you really appreciate the big difference between the trying to pack a lot of substance, textbook chapter 1 to chapter 20, in whatever months, versus the other kind of education where packing is not that important. More important is that there's some discussion, there's some free time. In fact, a lot of free time. I find that suddenly I had a lot of free time. And I then realized that university education is about that. Yeah, I mean, you're there to take your time to go and find out more. So, when I was in education, I did think, how can we create more free time for our students? To do the things that they are passionate about. And university, at least in the university, not vocational education, at least at the university, in fact, free time is so important. That students really discover themselves, and that is what is meant by, I would call it a university education, not just trying to remember that 50 books that you're supposed to have read through your 3-year program or 4-year or 5-year program. and it's quite sad. I think the Asian culture kind of education has always been focused on a lot of memory, a lot of checking whether at the end of the day you remember them all, you know, and you know that you can't remember them. You can remember them enough for the examination, and then 5 years later, you know, ask you what is McGregor X and Y, you'll probably be scratching your head and asking what exactly is X and what is Y. And of course, now with the internet, with the Google phone and, you know, phone with the Google, you know, search, you really can find all this information a very quick go. So the need to memorize and capture this information on your head is really unnecessary. Then what is university education, or what is education for? Education is for the forming of the mind. I think that's very important for me. I mean, rather than the cramming, you know, make sure you study that 50 chapters or 50 books, or, you know, or you know, the 10-year series, be able to answer all these questions. Yeah, right.
And I was teaching once at Republic Poly, and if I recall, you were also involved in the establishment of Republic Poly, right? And that is very interesting because they've got PBL, problem-based learning. Right. And also I realized that instead of standing in front of the class, I was actually at the back. And of course, the whole orientation was a paradigm shift. And the teachers or the staff, I think they have a learning experience also, you know, to like not wanting to tell, not wanting to share, but pulling yourself back and letting them and observing them. What was the thinking, the philosophy behind PBL?
I think the problem-based learning, at first I was also not very convinced, because I was quite worried for the students, because you know, the typical education system is to pack the student with you know, load full of knowledge, and then, you know, go on to the next level, and then they say, you got this load full of knowledge, then I can build on that load full of more knowledge for another load full of knowledge. But the reality of it is okay, back to PBL. We better talk about PBL. But I thought this idea that, you know, students search the information for themselves and come to their own conclusion, debate with their friends, and then had some kind of authoritative figure to the facilitator in the class, back of the class, who sort of, you know, what do you think this, you know, could be, you know, something else. There could be another option. There could be another thinking on the whole subject. And I think that is, in fact, very important, because that encourage our young person to say, oh, I can think for myself. I can, you know, I can look up material for myself, and I think that training also is in itself useful. You know, being able to search and be able to identify what is valid information, what is invalid information, because there are lots of information out there.
And of course, there's always still a big debate over PBL, the pros and cons, you know, and the debate will always continue.
I think the debate is always, I mean, I have some discussion. I mean, I was in Polytechnic, PBL, RP, Polytechnic, PBL, and I have discussion with the university people, and the university people are very, you know, apprehensive, because they say, hey, you didn't read that 30 chapters or 30 books or 50 books or whatever it is, you know, and they are quite worried, and maybe rightfully they might be so, but our system is built on that premise, you know, that you build the so-called basic layer, then I build a top layer. But maybe education in Singapore got to think a bit harder in terms of how we build our knowledge, you know, rather than in that kind of way. I would say, you know, when I did my university education, I mean, a lot of things I learned, actually quantum mechanics and so on and so forth, it's really not really useful, because when I went out to work as an engineer, I always tell people, you know, I didn't even use any of my differential equation and things like that. And I did differential equation to the third order, fourth order, and so on and so forth. And I didn't even see a first order differential equation, you know. out in the workplace. And
Yeah.
most of the time, we're looking at handbooks, solving the problem, taking some basic idea and getting it. But of course, understanding the basic concept is important.
And
But
what I wanted to
I sense that for example, in the university education, they are really preparing people for PhD. But the reality of it is 10% went for PhD because I mean you need that all your differential equation because you've got to do a PhD in atomic physics and whatever it is. Okay, you need those. But unfortunately, the 90% actually goes out to work who needs knowledge of how to resolve problem, if oil leak in the engine and things like that.
Yeah.
So there's something wrong with our education because we are very focused on preparing a person so that at least the university can sort of shortlist a few for PhD or masters or whatever program, but whereas the majority actually goes out to work. Same with the Polytechnic. If I prepare all my students for university, but the majority goes out and work, and then when they're working, they come back for university education. In fact, they learn much more if they go out and work, and then they learn, and then they come back to university to study. I mean, I did 2 master's program, and it was after a few years of working, and I really appreciate that the working experience because now I know what I'm looking for in my master's program rather than if I have finished my bachelor's then I go for master's. I really don't know. It's just another set of textbook replaced with a set of a more, if you want to use a local term, team, more difficult textbook. Then it becomes very sad. Whereas if you have worked a little bit and you come back and go for a master's program, you really knows, okay, these are important stuff, these are not so important stuff. You can lay aside, of course, you may need to learn enough to pass your examination, but it's not very important.
And because you discussed this, it brought up a few things. It's like, the PBL, where even when I was teaching it, I was thinking, oh my God, the students are not getting anything grounded, having the grasp of that concept. And I got worried, I got worried. It's like, okay, am I as a facilitator, as a teacher, am I giving them enough? It's like, have I done enough for them? There's always this wanting to give, especially in Asian context. It's like, okay, this is my child. I will give tuition, I will give ballet lesson, music lesson, cello lesson, sports, swimming, go to the debate team and go for the LDDS, and try to groom my child because, I actually have missed out on education myself. So now I want to give. And if I haven't give, I feel so guilty as a teacher. I feel guilty as a parent because I've not given them the opportunities to explore their faculties. There's always this thing about a thin line.
I think you felt guilty because you have not given them that 20 chapters or 30 books of information that you want to download on them very quickly and
download
and so forth.
Exactly.
But to be honest, I like I said, when I started the journey with my colleague who's actually the champion of PBL, Professor Alvisa, I was also a little bit unconvinced. But when I went in and I did some teaching, and I realized that there are other issues that we have to tackle in our education system. One, for example, is the communication skill. Our students refuse to talk. But after I don't know how many sessions, or after 3 years of solid, what do you think? If you don't think, you don't say anything, you don't get, A point or B or whatever it is in your score. I think that is invaluable. I remember in my first year, Republic Poly, when we have about 800 students, we sent our students to what we call a joint poly. I don't know whether you still remember, there's a joint poly, what they call seminar and things like that. We sent 50 students from 800, SP sent 50 students from 15,000 or 12,000 or 13,000. And NPC similarly sent another 50 students, the top of their class, because they, during that seminar, they meet ministers and so on and so forth. And I almost fall off my chair when our students actually queue up to ask the ministers question. And I said, there's something wrong here. There's something right here, because I mean, if I've loosened the tongue of my 800 students in a very significant way, I think it's very important. I mean, I was working in SGH, and I had my American, there was some American consultants who worked from them. We worked with them because they came over to help us restructure the hospital. And I realized that the Americans are very vocal, very able to speak. They may not have, to be honest, I will say, they may not have as much knowledge as us, but they certainly know how to present it better than us. And I think this is something that we will have to really help our young people. If you want to be a bit better than your Malaysian counterpart, the Cambodian counterpart, if you want to compete in this region, then I think part of that ability is the confidence that we can build on in our students, the ability to communicate, and it's just as important skill as layers and layers of equations and formulas and things like that. Because those things, in fact, in reality, in the working world, we never see it again. But in the working world, the communication ability, the confidence to stand up and say, hey, I think you might be wrong, I think, there's something wrong with it, rather than accept it because your teacher is always right.
Yeah, and I think you brought up a very important point. Number one, you had this Western, you were educated in a foreign country, in the US, and then also the point, UK, and then you had this experience about, speaking up. I'm just thinking in the Eastern society, right? In a very Confucius kind of traditional value that we have, we're not supposed to speak up to our parents, and you're supposed to be seen and not heard. And even in the class, even in the elementary schools, you are seen, not heard, and you're not supposed to so-called stick up from the rest of the class like a sore thumb. You're not supposed to be really, really compliant. How do you think we can move out of that? There's always pros and cons. That's good. I mean, you look at very conservative, compliant society like Japanese and Koreans, very, very compliant, and they work in unison. And also the Chinese, and versus the Western. Of course, what we can see in the media, what we can read by researchers are what is seen. But what about those cases that fall outside the bell curve, at the two ends of the bell curve? I'm thinking that it probably like the Western kind of education, at the age of 18, you are expected to leave home and you're not supposed to make any decisions by your parents. You live or you die, or you sleep in the street. I mean, so many stories you see people sleeping in the street because the parents didn't want to give them money, because this is your life decision. And people take up drugs, for example. People live their life the other way. And of course, there's another part that, the Western society has brought people who are leaders, people who are the norm breakers. So there's this bell curve that is probably flatter, but moving towards the tails are longer. However, in the Asian society, the bell curve is more like all towards the middle, right? Everybody is really like flat and they're all the same. So I'm looking at, I think we are at this crossroads, especially in this pandemic, when people are really trying to evaluate, disrupt. The whole society is being disrupted. All the economies, whatever economies, is all being disrupted, probably even the economy of education. So, we're always in this debate. And of course, there's a lot of mitigating factors, intervention factors, culture, acceptance, institutional, systemic direction versus individualistic, value in the West. I mean, there are a lot of various things we can talk about. But fundamentally, when you see in an Asian society, Chinese, Japanese, South Korean, or even Singaporean, we encourage that middle right? The bell curve that's in the middle. Hopefully everybody's squeezed in the middle. No one goes at the outlier, right? In the Western, it's like the outliers are the one that either perform or they doom or they die. What do you have to say?
I think the world is being disrupted by all this technology and just the last few decades, you can see a change from, the traditional GM, Ford, the big Shell company to, the Googles and the what. And how does this company like Google, Facebook, and so on and so forth comes forward? And they work on the basis that they tap on the strength of everybody. So this idea that, I'm the boss of GM and, I dictate everything seems like not a very workable solution. That means you depend on a few good people right at the top to solve the problem. So whereas in some of these other organizations, I also realized that as a management person or manager in my organization, I realized that we got to change our concept that, the guy who's the oldest will not always have the final say, the guy who got the highest pay may not need to be the final say, because we got to get the young people. That's where your McGregor X and Y come in. The whole idea of why is that, look, there's something, that guy who's right at the bottom, rung, are also interested in trying to do a good job or is trying to solve a problem, and he might have some ideas that you as the leader or as the manager or as the supervisor may not have thought of. So we got to respect that. But if we have a system where the minute the manager walked in, everybody shut up, then we are really in trouble, because we are now tapping the capability and knowledge of one person in it, rather than trying to tap the capability. So this Asian kind of hierarchical concept, I think we have to, if we want to compete at the level where the West are competing. I mean, their company are killing each other, at very, very, how to call it, very competitive sort of level, because, each company is tapping on the talents of everybody inside their company and be able to beat the next guy, Whereas if we depends on this current method, I mean, it will be difficult. I mean, and I mean, we are not going to blow away all the thing, I think the thing like xiao dao, the respect for elders. I think we can keep some of this, but we got to slowly realize that in organization, we got to tap on people. And we think that people wants to do a good job, which is your McGregor why, wants to do a good job. And if you're given a good opportunity, he will do his best, But if you just keep thumping him down and says that, look, you only do the way that I tell you, and he knows jolly well that this is not the best way, he's not going to be motivated. He's not going to help your organization grow. So I think this is something that it's not only just organization have to change, but even when I was in Republic Poly, I keep telling the students, hey, Mr. Liew sounds a little bit very formal. What do you call Eden? And of course, then they change it to Mr. Eden. Then I say, I'm more. but the point is, if we don't start saying that your idea is as good as mine, and rather than forever got this concept that my idea is always better than yours, then there's something. We are not going to be able to compete in the society, in the capitalist world of the West, because that is where innovation, ideas, and things come from, because they are tapping on the resources, the human resource or capability of their people.
Yeah, and that's why I think we go back to the question about the OECD. The OECD is math, science, and language. And I think in this current time, people are already talking about coding. Nobody is talking about mathematics or science. It's the language of the world. And I have this...
maths and science, I also feel that China, Japan, I think the Eastern countries still focus a lot on science. I think that's good, because the world is moving in the technological level, everything you see is IT, bioscience, and so on and so forth. We need to get our people. I mean, we don't need to train them all to be, rocket science or whatever it is, but we need them not to be afraid of science. And that's very important. If you are afraid of science, if you are afraid of that device that's on your table, then you are already finished, because that device is the one that enables the other guy to be faster, because he can communicate with his fellow workers, he can communicate with his boss, he can communicate with his supplier in China and Japan and in India simultaneously or concurrently or whatever it is. The technology have helped us a lot, and we got to get our people not afraid of science. That part I'm quite sure, and I'm quite in favor of our continual reliance on science and technology, as long as the young people wants to go in.
Yeah, and also because now it seems that if this pandemic is like making everybody go to ground zero, a lot of countries are now in recession. It seems that that baseline is down again, and it seems that everybody is at a starting point. You have a chance to really like go up. It's either before you were in front, maybe now you are down. Maybe now you are down, there's a chance for you to go up. This is a time whereby a lot of adjustments due to this pandemic.
Could be, yes, that's right. Yeah.
And I'm just thinking, because it is this huge disruption, the pillars of the world is breaking, and actually the world is changing in such a random, it's almost like the black hole now. Saying the world is really absorbing all the technology, and it's going to go into this huge explosion. How the world is going to be, how the countries and how politicians and governments going to control, it's going to be a little bit hard, because I would say it's really the democratization of education, democratization of technology. Anyone can have a handphone, and then you can broadcast to the world. It's really like democratization of skills. It's like everyone now, you are at ground zero. Someone in India, in the village, someone in Africa in the village who have the phone, they can compete. In the past, they didn't have any access to education at all, without any governmental intervention and infrastructure. But now there is a chance for people, because that's why I'm saying that it goes down. And it's going to accelerate. The world is changing so fast. And I'm just thinking, if let's say now you have this, and because now the world is really changing, and we do have to change when schools are starting. Even a lot of schools are not going back to school yet, like in London. Students are not going back to school, and there are 500 million students are kept at home now. They're not in school. So when they go back to school, it's going to be a whole new world. The game has changed. So with this big explosion coming to Singapore, external forces, democratization of education, democratization of technology, it's going to be so hard to put a finger to say that, hey, everyone is going to study subject A to, I studied 8 subjects and I studied 10 subjects at one point, and everybody did that. I would think that kind of formula and the kind of uniformity probably is going to be disrupted too. What do you think?
Well, I guess
subjects that the students are going to take in school or even in universities.
I think, of course, I mean, you're probably a good student, and therefore you took 8 subjects or 10 subjects, and if you can handle it, I think it's something that you are capable of doing, and you should. Of course, I mean, being in vocational education, IT, Polytechnics, I think for those students who can't handle the 8 subjects, I think this idea of a normal stream, I'm supportive of it. That maybe we should give them less and and allow them. But I think we also must learn to allow them a bit of, like I mentioned earlier, a bit of free time to discover something that they would like to do. Whether it's they like aero modeling, or they like for example, in IT College East, we're trying to say, hey, all these young people, they like to carry weights and things like that. I mean, if they really like it and they enjoy this kind of physical activity, they can be gym, they can be, I always say, when I went to this Universal, there's this guy, in what you call Conan or something like this, and he got bulging muscles and things like that. Well, I mean, if there's, there will be more ways of earning a living, and we need to, in the education sector, we don't need to stream everybody to be a mechanical technologist, or we don't need to stream everybody into bioscience, but for those who can do it and who likes it, well, carry on. But there will be some on the fringe who prefers to play piano in the nightclub, who prefer to, sing in the, wherever, or who prefer to do other things, like being a scuba diver, or whatever it is, and use those skills that they acquire in their school time, university time, the poly time, IT time. I think that part we must learn how to diversify and allow them to actually explore their ability. That's why I say when I was in the university, I mean, I had a lot of time, and actually those times I was reading a lot of other books and other things, and really discovered that, hey, actually I'm really interested in engineering and so on and so forth, rather than just trying to cram them with, so many formulas that they don't even have time to breathe, because they are now trying to finish their assignment, tutorial projects, their lab reports and things like that. Yeah.
You characterize yourself, how many percentage in theory X and theory Y? I mean, to me, it's very important. It's like how a leader brings the culture to the workplace, and the culture is number one. That's why the American Facebook culture and the Google culture, they gave very little rules and regulations, etc. But in Alibaba, Jack Ma, he says that everybody must work 996. 996 means work from 9 to 9 and then 6 days a week, just leaving you 1 day. And the American ways are totally different. And both are successful in some ways. But how would you characterize yourself? Are you more X, Y? What's the proportion, and how are we going to move forward as an Asian society?
Of course, when I started life in the military, we were all about X lah, huh? And then slowly as you move on and you realize that actually a lot of time you can't control. I mean, you might be a manager. I always tell people at the age of 20 something, I was a manager of about 100 to 100%, people who are much older than me, who are machinists and things like that, I mean, but the reality of it is, as a manager, you really can't control too many people. So don't try lah. I mean, if you can motivate and you can help them to feel important in their own work, I think, and therefore I'm more a Y person now. Maybe if you want to say 70% Y, or 80% Y rather than 20. Of course, once in a while you get a little bit upset and say, hey, you got to do it this way because I think this is the most efficient way of doing it. Sure, I mean, you will give that input, but try your best to hold back that, do it this way because I think this is the best way. Because if you allow them to do the way that they want, they might give you a better job than you force your way on them. Yeah.
So the way forward, right? I mean, we are now in this crossroad in Singapore, in Asia, and the Ministry of Education is going to revamp a lot of curriculum. They say they're going to do a lot of changes. For the school, for the minister, even for anyone heading huge organizations, particularly now we're talking about in education. How do we change our mindset from someone like myself or someone who thinks that, hey, I think I need to punish more, for example, okay? Because punishment is easy, right? We take away something. Abstinence is a punishment. We take away a kind of reward. How do you think we could move forward on a very macro level and make the people who are below the institutions, the people are they are the bricks and mortars of an institution. How do we change that mindset? Even parents have to change that mindset. Like, hey, I'm not going to beat up my child. If my child does not get 100 for spelling, um, or I'm going to trust my child to do the best at work even without the cane. And the cane, um, it's that kind of very feudalistic. I mean, I'm not saying that it's good or bad. I'm just saying that there's pros and cons. It has its place. Being admonishing a child, chiding a child, and instructing a child is very important. And versus giving them a little bit of liberty. And that is a very thin, very, very delicate balance. And how do we move as an institution or as a country to change that mindset that, hey, I'm going to trust my people. I'm going to trust my workers. I'm going to use that theory X a little bit more. I mean, theory Y a little bit more. When the Confucius on the Oriental side of us is always more towards theory X because we were brought up that way by our parents. What do you think?
Well, I guess the best way to do it is to model. I think, of course, I think part of the leader's job is always to talk, persuade. When you meet your colleagues one to one, or one to many, you try your best to bring that idea, convince them, and persuade them that this have to be the direction. This have to be the future, because if you want to compete, we cannot be, we cannot be the way we were, and we got to change our way. And of course, you as the leader, or you are in this position, you model the way for them. I was just thinking about your word Confucius. You was brought up. I mean, I've been reading a bit of Confucius, and I also realized that Confucius as a teacher is quite a. I mean, from what I read, it's quite a personality. Because, for example, people asked him, certain things. Oh, do I go forward? After I learn something, then to one person he says, yes. Go forward. And to another person, he may say another thing quite opposite and says, oh, you better check with your elders or whoever it is. So Confucius, if you read Confucius a little bit, he sort of tailor his education style according to the ability of his so-called students or disciples or whatever it is. I think we also have to do less sort of, everybody follow this way, learn everything this way, but rather tailor the sort of, the instruction, the sort of, the way you handle each person, each group in a slightly different way according to their ability to move forward or their ability to learn quickly or whatever it is. Yeah. So I think that's also another area that we really have to work on. How do we be a bit be able to tailor a little bit of our especially in education sector, how do we tailor our education a little bit towards the need of the students, identify it, and so on and so forth. Of course, one of the important way, which I think most educators would say that, let's reduce the class size, and which I think the government have been a little bit backwards on this matter. 40 in a class is still a little bit too much, I mean, at least in there. And IT model that also 40 in a class, I mean, I know the classroom size. I think Republic Poly did a great job because, they forced the class to be 25. So you have much more time to interact, and there's space in between. I usually stay back in the, after our first session, second session, stay interact with them and help them on an individual basis. Because mass mass production doesn't work. I may not say it doesn't work, but I think a bit of tailoring, especially in education, even in management, may be useful. Yeah.
Now it begs the final question: the tiger moms and the tiger dads, do they have their place? Me looking at, because this tiger moms and tiger dads, for example, the society in the US, US is really, really liberal. But the best performers or people who really, really rise up in a very quiet way are the Asians, because they have the tiger moms and the tiger dads who force them to really excel in whatever faculty that they're in. That's why quiet, not in the media, not celebrated, and they're not celebrities. They're not like the Elon Musk, and they're not the celebrities, or the innovators, but they made themselves a mark. How do we balance that tiger moms and tiger dads? Is there a place um, for tiger moms and tiger dads now?
I don't know. I was now that I'm a little bit retired, so I watched some of these Chinese series. So recently I watched one, something about it's the same issue, young people growing up, and that the tiger moms and mainly tiger moms lah. Okay, I think they emphasize on tiger moms. I think for the Chinese, at least in the Chinese context, because I also want to know what is happening in China. So watching the TV series is quite good. So they are all struggling to finish their Gaokao so that they can go to the top tier university. Then if not the second tier, then the third tier, and so on and so forth. And they get very disappointed if they don't. So in Singapore also we are also a bit like that, the equivalent to the tiger mums. Equivalent to their system, except we want to get to Hwa Chong lah, we want to get to I don't know, Temasek lah, or whatever it is, So but the point in that particular story that I was watching recently was, at the end of it, the young person may have their own views on what they want to really to do in life. One of them says, okay, I want to be a reporter, and it's very important. And you suddenly realize that being a tiger mom actually doesn't help this girl, or this young person develop, because he's talking about law, medicine or whatever it is, and things like that, which maybe the person may not be interested in. So I think I don't know, maybe I have never been a very tiger father type of person.
But you see that very prevalent in Singapore. Parents who there's always two types. Parents who are really like going through that, and me, my personal experience is that, and because I grew up with a single mom, my dad died when I was 7. I kind of pushed myself. I really pushed myself, even at a very young age. And because I think that maturity came when I was really young, when you don't have a father, and you see your mom is working so hard, you feel that you have to rise up to the occasion, even when you're very, very young. So I think I don't know. This is still a very big, pertinent question that I think will always revolve around the Asian society, the tiger moms and tiger dads, and also knowing that the tiger moms and tiger dads, they always have the interest of the child at heart. Really, because they wanted to give the best to the child when they had none.
But are they reflecting the actual needs of the child, or are they reflecting the desire to say my son is a lawyer, or my son is a CEO of a company, or my son is a doctor, or whatever it is? I'm not very sure about that. Sometimes we may have taken we have not heard our children more than we have not heard their needs or their interests or their desire. Sometimes forcing them to that may even be disastrous. Sometimes I wonder. Sometimes.
Yeah. Do you have
so,
any?
But I think the real, not say real solution. The other solution. I mean, the other thing that we as a society have to think about is all these good schools and things like that. And so that we can relieve the pressure of the tiger mums and tiger dads. That means somehow find ways to, make schools a little bit more, how do you call it, evenly spread out, and instead of having to say, okay, unless you reach, so many points, you go to that. Of course, the government is doing something about this area, but we can do more to help, to prevent this incentive, because the incentive is there, if you don't make it. I mean, I remember, in my son's secondary school, ACS, Barker Road versus ACS Independent. Independent got the better students, Barker Road. And I sent my three sons all went to Barker Road. And when I would look at the other parents, I mean, the first time when I saw the other parents, they were very sad, because it is obvious that their son didn't go to Independent, So can we find some way to make that feeling less? Because it drives the behavior of the parents, you see. If we can take away that pressure, or take away that, your son really is not very good, that's why he's ITE, or your son is not very good because he's in this poly versus that poly, or your son is not very good because he's in, this university instead of NUS or whatever it is. So can we find some way to reduce that kind of pressure from society itself?
Yeah, and I also think that really, because of nation building, we are the generation of because Singapore has a really short history, and also Asia really came up from poverty. The last couple of generations, even like China, within the last 20 years, they have lifted 50% of the population out of poverty. But I would think that it was because of that historical background, or the historical baggage, that parents have this insecurity, that they're unconsciously imposing that on the child. It's a manifestation of insecurity, that your future will be doomed if you don't have this to hold on to, really, because they never had anything in the past. So I thought that, and in fact, a lot of things really go through my mind, and our conversation can go on. It's really interesting. Yeah. Eden, is there any last words that you would like to share with your experience and words of wisdom?
Oh, no lah. It's just that I think we as a society can be more relaxed. We have reached a certain level of development. I think we could be a little bit more relaxed and look at how we can do more to help those who are not doing as well. Instead of just focusing on this, top 5-10% scholarship and things like that, or whatever it is, those, and address the people at a lower level and says, how can we help those people? Because that also drives that idea that they are good schools. Every school is a good school. As the Minister for Education, once used to say, every school is a good school. How do you create that environment so that, and that environment also helps to uplift the people at the lower level, because this separation of the rich versus the poor is another big issue in our society, and we need to resolve it. And we can only resolve it if we be more relaxed at the top end, and do more at the lower end.
Yeah, and I think you brought up just a very important point when I was talking to my American friend over WhatsApp. She's in the US. She was saying that the Americans, some of them are so rich that you have no imagination. And of course, because the capitalistic system by Keynesian theory have created 1% of the world that holds now 90% of the world's wealth. And most of them, of course, are in the US. I think that would be a good topic to explore if we ever have a chance next time. But I think this is on a micro level, back onto the local level. I think you're right to say that, there's huge gap between the richest on the richest strata versus those who do not even get up, the opportunities given to them. And this is the big debate in America right now for the election. Socialist versus capitalism. But of course, we're not talking about socialism as in really social. We're talking about like giving people more a leg up, and also I could call it the personal social responsibility of the richest people. Right? We have CSR, corporate social responsibility. What about the wealthy and the rich, corporate social responsibility? But the richest people are not giving money to their children in the Western society. They are really giving it away to charities. They really feel that money is just a yardstick of their success and their hard work, and they're not leaving money to their children. I mean, if you look at Warren Buffett, Bill Gates, they're not leaving any money. Even Steve Jobs, they are giving away, pledging it to charities. So this is another huge observation that the world is moving forward to. Hopefully, more people will do that. And I think in an Asian society, we have not come to that kind of epiphany by the rich people yet. Until at a certain level. But definitely it's something that I'm so interested to talk about in the future. Thank you so much, Eden, for sharing with us. And
no problem.
Our conversation will be shared online, and I've got lots of friends who are very interested in hearing what an Asian society has to say some of these issues. Behind the doors, what do you talk about, besides what we read in the newspapers, not something that is our everyday life, non-controversial, but everybody has to live through it. I mean, money, jobs, relationship, economics, finance, retirement, aging, illness, and everybody returns to the dust at the very end. All of us at the very, very end, all of us can bring nothing with us. So on this end, I would like to thank Eden, and I hope that we can meet you again. And if you have any issues that you'd like to share with us, I myself am so open to having a conversation with you. I have a line of people who I've lined up to share my talk with. I spoke to a Swedish friend who talked about herd immunity because they never wear masks in Sweden. People, that was the policy. The government did away with masks. They say that we believe in you. They're using the theory why. We believe that you can be responsible. We believe that you will take care of yourself and take care of your neighbors. We're not going to impose masks and you can go out. So they are using such a liberal policy. Okay, I mean that's from the point of view, but of course we're talking about the statistics that the highest rate in terms of death rate in Europe. But I did have a conversation with her, something very illuminating. She says that the game is not over yet. We don't know which policy works in which country, right? The game is not. If WHO says this is going to be for 2 years, the pandemic is going to be for 2 years. We are only seeing the first phase of the curve, the first phase of the curve. So we really wouldn't know. And I'm going to talk to a doctor tomorrow, Indian doctor, about the controversy of hydroxychloroquine. I'm not sure if you read about it, because Donald Trump talked about hydroxychloroquine, and there's a big debate now about, in the internet, people call it conspiracy theories. I watch a lot of what people say online rather than just the news. Conspiracy theories, because there's so much money in vaccine. They wanted to stop a drug that works because the money is already out there. So, they did blacklist and silence certain doctors who promoted hydroxychloroquine. I don't know, but there are other doctors who say that it gives a lot of risk. So I'm going to talk to an Indian doctor tomorrow, because hydroxychloroquine is mainly manufactured in India. And India has one of the most, they produce one of the most doctors in America. A lot of doctors in America are Indians. So I'm going to talk to him, and also another friend. I'm going to talk to some Iranians there's very little news from Iran. What we can read are actually controlled, probably manufactured or slanted. I'm trying to get many people from the very low level, people like us. We are just the man in the street, right? So I'm trying to get people to hear from them rather to hear from the media. So it's going to be like talking about the controversy of hydroxychloroquine, a drug that is $10, that a lot of doctors say it works. And we should administer this in the hospitals because it works. And there are people who say that, who's trying to shut it down, like WHO is trying to shut it down. So I'm going to talk to a doctor tomorrow, and next week to an American woman. She's going to talk about investing in real estate. So, but diverse topics. So I hope that I can invite you one of these days again. Your thoughts about Singapore, or the world, the capitalistic. I should say that side effects, and how do we mitigate and how do we improve? I think that would be a positive tilt to that. Thank you so much, Eden.